Bare-Knuckled faith, welcoming home the disowned self, and recovering from a bipolar world and religion. Episode 3, Death, God, and the borderline between Advent and Christmas. Welcome back. Death. Death is not evil, but the denial of death can be a source of great evil. Death itself is not the enemy or the problem. In fact, death is a necessary element of health for any natural ecosystem. Death is part of the wholeness, and it allows for life and for life abundant. Death itself is not the enemy or the problem. Now that seems so obvious as to be duh, but we mostly hate death and fear it. It's an unknown and we don't like not knowing. It's a flagrant slap in the face with our powerlessness, and we certainly do not like being powerless. It's a source of loss, and if there's anything that we don't like, it is grief. So even though we rationally know and understand that death is as much a part of life as an intimate partner to everything that lives, we expend tremendous amounts of psychic energy resisting and denying and rebelling against death. In fact, our denial of death can energize and fund choices with significantly evil consequences. And by evil, remember, I do not mean the opposite of God or good. Rather, evil is that which fragments or corrodes the wholeness and health of the greater ecosystem. I remember stumbling onto Ernst Becker's denial of death when I was 18 years old. Somehow I had it with me on a very small propeller airplane flying from Muncie, Indiana to Chicago. I tried to read it as the plane was bouncing through turbulence, and it made me so anxious I had to put the book away. It was years and years and years before I could read it again. I think Becker was an anthropologist and more or less believed that our anxiety around personal death awareness was the source of cultural bigotry and social violence. I'm going to quote extensively here Glenn Hughes summarizing Becker's work. This can be found on the Ernst Becker Foundation website. It begins, Becker was searching for explanations of why human society develops in the way that it does. And he was particularly interested in why human society is so violent, why different social groups are so intolerant and hateful of each other, end of quote. Now, as I continue reading this, please be thinking about the United States today with Trump and his MAGA movement at the apex of power. Hughes, summarizing Becker, writes, human beings are mortal and we know it. Our sense of vulnerability and mortality gives rise to a basic anxiety, even a terror about our situation. So we devise all sorts of strategies to escape awareness of our mortality and our sense of vulnerability, as well as our anxious awareness of it. This psychological denial of death, one of the main functions of culture, according to Becker, is to help us successfully avoid awareness of our mortality. That suppression of awareness plays a crucial role in keeping people functioning. If we were constantly aware of our fragility or the nothingness that we're a split second away from at all times, we'd go nuts. And how does culture perform this crucial function? Well, by making us feel certain that we, or realities that we're part of, are permanent and invulnerable and eternal. And in Becker's view, some of the personal and social consequences of this are disastrous. So, to summarize this summary so far, our anxiety about our own mortality is dealt with by finding ideas, activities, and associations that enable us to feel less vulnerable, and in extreme, give us a certain sense of immortality. Hughes continues, first, at the personal level, by ignoring our mortality and vulnerability, we build up an unreal sense of self, and we act out of a false sense of who and what we are. Second, as members of society, we tend to identify with one or another immortality system, as Becker calls it. That is, we identify with a religious group or a political group, or engage in some kind of cultural activity, or adopt a certain culturally sanctioned viewpoint that we invest with ultimate meaning and to which we ascribe absolute and permanent truth. This inflates us with a sense of invulnerable righteousness. End of quote. Get it? So Becker, according to Hughes, has in mind things that should sound familiar to us in 2025. Think white supremacy or America First, but also militant anything, feminism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Marxism, any kind of belief system that forms a primary lens through which we interpret the whole rest of the world. That's what Becker's getting at. Okay, here's the last of Becker's summary I want to include here. It's sort of the punchline to all this. Quote, now we have to protect ourselves against the exposure of our absolute truth being just one more mortality-denying system among others, which we can only do by insisting that all other absolute truths are false. So we attack and degrade, preferably kill, the adherents of different mortality-denying absolute truth systems. So Protestants kill Catholics, Muslims vilify the Christians, and vice versa. Upholders of the American way of life denounce communists. The communist Khmer Rouge slaughters all the intellectuals in Cambodia. The Spanish Inquisition tortures heretics, and all good students of the Enlightenment demonize religion as the source of all evil. The list could go on and on and on. I think that pretty much sums up our moment in history, don't you? But also all moments in human history as well. Underneath so much of what we find disturbing and awful around us, as well as within us, if we just dig a little, is death. Our fear or lack of resolve about our own personal death. So death, our own death, is just another part of our disowned self. And there in our shadow is an awareness of our own mortality. And when it's left unconscious, it wreaks havoc. Looking inward to the embodied soul, we need to consider where and how all the disowned parts of ourselves might actually improve the health of our internal life. How our disowned self might actually improve the health of our internal life. Do we live in denial about or abandon significant parts of ourselves? All those things we don't like or fear or have been told are awful about us. What do we do with them? If we have stuffed them away, hidden them, run from them, blocked them, it's enabling our fragmentation rather than nurturing our wholeness. It's a case that what may seem natural or instinctive to repress or repel or shun is itself an evil act, or minimally has evil consequences. Here's an example. We all hold shame. Someone important to us, probably at some critical stage, told us that we should not have done something, or we should not be something, or we should not do something. And we internalize those dictates with a feeling of shame because they evaluated us so harshly. There may well be some positive strength or positive quality of character that could be recovered if we allowed ourselves to return and to give that banished piece of who we are some love. Here's what might happen. We do the hard work of therapy, spiritual direction, journaling, dream analysis, and we recover parts of ourselves lost to shame, resentments, guilt, hatreds, and anger. As we do, suddenly enormous amounts of new vitality and new energy and new wisdom are recovered. Keeping ourselves unconscious, condemning significant parts of ourselves to the shadow, actually saps enormous amounts of energy. It's like AI and cryptocurrencies that demand huge amounts of energy that makes it cost more for all the other users. Our repression and coercion require significant resources and energy to be stolen from more life-giving activity. We often avoid, deny, and resist what we fear. Frequently, we refuse to embrace parts of ourselves and one another simply because we don't like them or because they make us uncomfortable. But again, our avoidance can be fragmenting rather than integrative. Once again, I think about my own experience as an alcoholic. These days, it's more likely to be defined as a disease or alcohol use disorder, as it's called, than when I got sober in the 1980s. Back then, many people still saw alcoholism as a personal moral failure. I have a disease makes the acknowledgement of an addiction so much more accessible than being a failure. If what I am is despicable, how can I change? If I'm a moral failure, I might as well keep on failing because clearly I'm not going to succeed. So goes the deluded thought process of some alcoholics yet to enter recovery. Having colitis, for example, is a health liability to incorporate into one's self-knowledge, and so go about living with it and managing it. No moral judgment, no sense of being a sinner. It's part of who one is, just as being short or tall, bald or curly-headed is part of who one is. If we could hold those parts of ourselves that we have disowned with the same equanimity that we accept the color of our eyes or our shoe size, we could then address them. We could calm them. We could learn from them less destructively than when we repress and reject them. In fact, the whole metaphor of doing battle with our shadow really needs to be healed. It will require, of course, a new vocabulary and a serious recalibrating of our understanding of ancient Hebrew and Christian texts. But until we do, Christianity is the source of the problem. This is a quote from Andrew Bare-Knuckler. He wrote, "When evil ceases to be demonized, we're forced to deal with it in human terms. Our inner split makes us attached to the war of good against evil. If we hold that the warring mode is itself the evil, then we're challenged to find a new moral dynamic that embodies the peace for which we strive. To the extent that morality takes the form of war, we will be compelled to choose sides, identifying with one part of ourselves and repudiating another." Just to hammer home this common thread that's running through these 3 episodes, evil is not the opposite of good. Rather, evil is incarnate in what leads to separation, disintegration, fragmentation. For example, deforestation, apartheid, death of coral reefs, all of them consequences of ideas and actions that do not see the interdependent and interconnected nature of creation. What the good is that which moves us toward wholeness, allowing us to perceive and nurture the interdependency with which the cosmos was created. Remember, the creation is sacramental, reflecting the Creator. It's not incidental then that the creation is rooted in interdependency. No one is all evil, but everyone holds the voice of evil and does evil or actions with evil consequences. Likewise, nothing is all evil. Even the leaders and puppet masters of collective evil remain complex human beings and hold within them the potential for nurturing interdependency as well as their wreaking fragmentation. So categorical either or dismissal of individuals or whole peoples is what we do to the unwanted citizens of our own personal shadows. We need to discover alternatives to responding to and managing what is evil and or has evil consequences. We will not be rid of evil or imperfection any more than we will ever dispel our shadow. These are not options, which seems almost too obvious to say, except that there is such a pervasive, bastardized form of Christianity hanging around in the world that it makes the obvious important to say. We should not be complacent about our issues any more than we should be hyper-religious. Rather, We need to enhance the practice of loving our whole self as indeed God loves us. This is how healing, recovery, and transformation take place. We need to reform our theology, our liturgical, and our spiritual practices. Otherwise, we won't have a shot in hell of bringing ourselves and one another into greater wholeness. Well, it begins with Imaginal Dei. That's the belief that we are created in the image of God. Well, this seems like a somewhat measurable, if not replicable, imagination. If God is the creator of all that is, from the vast expanse of interstellar space to naked mole rats, then all of creation is sacramental. A sacrament, remember, is the outward invisible sign of an inward and invisible reality, truth or grace. The creation and all that is in it, if God is its source, reflects the Creator. Done. What we've gotten so terribly wrong is the notion that God is only composed of what we like and what we think is good for us. We have mostly defined evil by what wreaks havoc on human beings, like plagues or volcanoes or pestilence. But God is the creator of all that is. And so all of it must reflect God in some way, just like the elements of our shadow, that which we disown, also reflects who we are. You see, in God, there are no opposites. I love that old Wesley hymn, "In God there is no east or west, no south or north is there." It could be an 18th century European white man's version of yin and yang. In God there are no opposites or poles, only the variety of elements in the ecosystem that make up the wholeness. God is the wholeness of the cosmos, and far beyond that, no doubt. So the tempest and the still point, the darkness and the light, the good and the bad are all parts of the wholeness. The more we can expand our awareness, our consciousness of what is here in this ecosystem all around us and within us, and accept its presence even where we fear or are repulsed by it, well, the more whole we can become. And the thing we should be reaching for with our spirituality is not perfection, but wholeness. Christianity was corrupted with the virus of moral perfectionism, and in its absence, the presumed rot of moral decay. It's an either-or, bipolar kind of theology. But rather than reaching for the absence of sin, which is impossible, our effort should be an understanding and an integration of what we have labeled as sins. The aim of our spirituality needs to be the expansion of our consciousness so that we can embrace more and more of what is here in the field around us and within us. Again, political psychologist Andrew Bare-Knuckler has written, "What we cannot face will catch us from behind." This happens, he says, when we run from or repress those elements of ourselves that we label as dark, evil, shameful, sinful, or repugnant. Forced to live in the recesses of our mind, they will come from behind and jump us when we least expect it. And when this happens, we can be traumatized or devastated by some random act that has jumped from our shadow into the light. Or less dramatically, we may simply be embarrassed when we do or say something that, well, just wasn't like us. clearly, there's no tying this topic up into a neat little package with a nice bow. So I'll end with a nod toward the season we are in. The Christmas story is a human shadow story, to be sure. As we so often do with our own dark sides, we have decorated the heck out of Christmas so that it's unrecognizable. It's sweet and syrupy, and of course, gilded for excellent sales. But whether it's Matthew's or Luke's version, very different stories, the birth of God incarnate has far more shadow characters than the celestial lighted ones. In Luke, the witnesses who are on the stand for the defense are definitely shadow figures. I'm talking about the shepherds. They were outcasts in their day, untrusted, much maligned, and considered very unsavory. Yet they were picked to testify as God's appointed agents. Also in the background of Luke's story, but written thickly between the lines, is the Roman Empire. Their spears and their swords provide motivation and velocity for movement within the story. It's the same in Matthew's version of Christmas too. Bloodthirsty King Herod is the prime mover behind the scenes. Herod's attempt to find and kill Jesus is thwarted by the three sorcerers. It's only their cleverness that puts in motion the infanticide of many hundreds, if not thousands, of male children perpetrated in hopes of eliminating the chosen one. The act and the reactions are all part of the same drama, connected by the theater or ecosystem they are in. Because God cannot act within the field of human history without causing an opposite reaction, yin and yang, holding each other together within the tension of time and space. Our attention, of course, zooms in on and focuses on the good, the light, and the holy. We hope that it will outshine the darkness so that the evil will be vanquished. We wrap those hopes in our mythology and we tell the stories that way. Yet God is present in the world and revealed in the darkness and the light. God is available in and to creatures who move about in the shadows, as well as when we walk around in the light. Advent is the season of waiting on the border of incarnation, expecting God to come and eliminate the shadows, to enlighten the darkness. But in fact, God is present in Advent too, no less than in Advent than any other season of life. God is the wholeness within which all seasons are held. God is the wholeness within which all goodness and evil are held. God is the wholeness within which all light and every darkness is held. In God, there is no east or west, no south or north is there. For opposites are not opposite within the wholeness of God. They're only bits and pieces of the whole. Now, this is the deep and the abiding peace of faith. This is the trust that embraces even death. This is the hope that lives even when what we wanted is for it to disappear. God is the wholeness, and we are the bits and the pieces of the whole. There is nothing and no one that can take away our partness within the love of God. Just as surely as we are embodied soul, just as surely as our embodied souls retains the stardust of the Big Bang, our body and our soul remain part of the wholeness that holds it all. And we can trust that, really hold on to it. Then we can love what and who is within our shadow. Then we can begin moving about through the world, seeking to recognize and to understand those who have become other to us. As we catch ourselves mentally dividing the world into good and evil, sacred and profane, right and wrong, we can instead seek to understand how all of it is connected. Exploring the wholeness and seeking to nurture and heal the ecosystems within which we live could be the kind of Christian spiritual practice that heals the world instead of divides it. Well, I'll finish this final episode of the series with a poem from Last Will and Testament, my latest book. It's entitled simply Trust. Once a voice challenged me to trust God. The problem, the voice said without using any words, was not the black hole within the border of my anxiety. It was the absence of trust at the beginning of my faith. Years after the voice spoke without using words, a thin veil dissolved in the river of my tears. Then I could see. I had tried using God, an aphrodisiac, a palliative, an obliterating anodyne, to eradicate the terror cell inside. And one day, which arrived over and over and over again, I learned all questions for which I most wanted answers could be asked, but never revealed. Live with it, the voice said without words. How? I asked with words, sometimes loud words, sometimes bitter, hostile words, sometimes ugly words. Trust, the voice said. Just trust. Well, thank you for being here and participating in this community. As always, may the peace of God be with you. Just a little epilogue. In the coming weeks, there will be a Christmas worship video available for your use and reflection. And there will also be a brief Denim Spirit post, both on Christmas and New Year's. In January, look for another Bare-Knuckled Faith, a series, this one on spiritual practices of renewal. Well, blessings on your holiday. Thank you so much for being part of the Subversive Preacher community.